Naughty Dog made its mark in video games with successful titles such as Crash Bandicoot, Jak and Daxter, and Uncharted. Before these popular titles, they have also developed games including Dream Zone, Keith the Thief, Rings of Power, and The Way of the Warrior. The company is very well known for its unique way of handling game development, as the studio does not have a producer on either of their teams. But then, in 2009, after the release and success of Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, a new title that will be one of the most acclaimed games of all time was being developed. Influenced by the games Ico and Resident Evil 4, this game would take place in a post-apocalyptic world where humanity lives in settlements and quarantine zones in fear of raiders and cannibalistic creatures infected by spores spread by fungi. This game had the success of selling over 1.3 million units, becoming the biggest launch of 2013 and winning Game of the Year awards. A year later on the PS4, a remastered version was released. By October of 2019, the game had the success of selling over 20 million copies worldwide. This game would also spawn a sequel in 2020 and a television series on 2023 on HBO. This is the history of The Last of Us. The Last of Us was first teased on early December of 2011 as a PlayStation 3 exclusive on the internet. The cryptic trailer showed live-action shaky cam footage of flaming cars, quarantine zones, displaced families wearing surgical masks, and riots. The trailer is narrated by a character lamenting the past and the future without simple things such as airplanes flying in the sky and people going about their daily lives. The game was titled The Last of Us, but no one knew who was making the game at the time. At the same time, there was a connected video showing an ant moving erratically until something started to grow out of its head. Fans quickly connected the video to Planet Earth, a BBC program. Specifically, it was connected to a segment on the cordyceps fungus. This parasite forces an ant to climb to a certain height, kills it, and grows out of its dead carcass in a macabre display, eventually releasing spores to infect other ants. Many of these varieties of insect-focused cordyceps exist, and each one targets a specific species of bug. The first trailer of The Last of Us debuted at the Spike TV Video Game Awards. It was revealed that Naughty Dog was in charge of the game's creation and development, and it whipped fans into a frenzy. The trailer of the game showed the main protagonists Joel and Ellie fighting against scavengers and then running away from cannibalistic humans infected by the cordyceps fungus, which caused the end of society. Ellie narrated how the old world used to be before the global pandemic caused by the downfall of civilization. The gameplay would later be shown at E3 2012, and fans were into a frenzy once again as the gameplay, graphics, voice acting, and visuals demolished expectations. The story of the game revolves around Joe Miller, a hardened survivor who at the beginning of the game tries to flee his hometown with his brother and daughter as the cordyceps infection starts to turn humans into hyper-aggressive cannibals. He would suffer an incredibly crippling loss while trying to escape. 20 years pass since that time, and in this post-apocalypse, what remains of humanity lives in settlements, quarantine zones, ruined cities inhabited by murderous scavengers, and fighting against the infected for survival. Joel is then tasked by a resistance group called the Fireflies with smuggling a 14-year-old girl named Ellie. Upon the beginning of their journey to meet the Fireflies, Joel discovers that Ellie is immune to the cordyceps infection, and the rebel faction believes that she may be the key for a cure of the infection.
It's 3 weeks old.
Preliminary work on The Last of Us began on October 2009, shortly after the success of Naughty Dog's video game Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. The game was under the codename Project Thing, or T1. For the first time in the company's history, developer Naughty Dog split into two teams to work on projects concurrently. While one team developed Uncharted 3: Drake's Deception, the other began work on The Last of Us. In order to run the two teams smoothly, co-presidents Evan Wells and Christoph Balestra chose game director Bruce Straley and creative director Neil Druckmann to lead development on The Last of Us. Straley, who was employed at Naughty Dog in March of 1999, was selected to lead the project based on his experience and work on previous projects. While Druckmann, an employee since 2004, was chosen for his determination and talent for design about a year into the game's production. Initially, Joel was intended to be Ellie's father, but the concept was scrapped due to the team finding out this to be too limiting in terms of character development. The team chose Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson to portray Joel and Ellie respectively. Providing both the voice and motion capture of the characters, Baker and Johnson assisted the team to develop the characters and help refine the story. The relationship between Joel and Ellie was a central focus of the game, and all other elements were developed around it. Various other characters were influenced by the story progression, ultimately becoming completely different from the initial vision. Troy Baker is famous for his voice work in games such as Blood Rain, Arkham City, Arkham Origins, Final Fantasy XIII, and so on. He is also famous for his voice work in various anime and cartoons. As for Ashley Johnson, she is famous for her role as Chrissy Seaver in the family sitcom Growing Pains. And she also worked in movies such as What Women Want, The Help, The Avengers, and so on. Creative director Neil Druckmann was inspired to include the infected as a main enemy in the game after discovering the cordyceps fungi. Set 20 years after the outbreak has destroyed much of civilization, the game explores the possibility of the fungi infecting humans. While at the university, Druckmann had an idea to merge the gameplay of Ico in a story set during the zombie apocalypse, like that of George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead, with a lead character similar to John Hartigan from Sin City. The lead character, a police officer, will be tasked with protecting a young girl. However, due to the lead character's heart condition, players will often assume control of the young girl, reversing the roles. Druckmann later developed it when creating the story of The Last of Us. Druckmann views The Last of Us as a coming-of-age story in which Ellie adapts to survival after spending time with Joel, as well as an exploration of how willing a father is to save his child. The Last of Us features a musical score by Argentine musician and composer Gustavo Santaolalla. Santaolalla is famous for composing in movies such as Amores Perros, The Motorcycle Diaries, Brokeback Mountain, Fast Food Nation, and Babel. Due to Santaolalla's stance on composing music, he lacks knowledge in reading and writing sheet music, preferring simply to record. He began working on The Last of Us in early development. To give Santaolalla a point to base his music, Druckmann simply told him about the story and themes as opposed to giving specific instruction on composing. Santaolalla appreciated this freedom, feeling it assisted in the composing. To compose, Santaolalla felt the need to go into some more dark place, more textural, and not necessarily melodic. Once the team heard the main theme of the game, they were very impressed, and they kept it. The inspiration behind the art design of the game came from Robert Polidori's photographs of Lower Ninth Ward following Hurricane Katrina were used as a reference point when designing the flooded areas of Pittsburgh. The concept of post-apocalyptic environments was considered by the artist as a starting point. The art team was also striving to add realism within every piece of art. During the creation of The Infected, the art team cycled through various iterations. Some early ideas included the infected looking like aliens or zombies. Another early idea was that the cordyceps infection was going to affect only women, but that idea was scrapped after many artists and developers felt that the game would be too misogynistic if they did that. The final design was chosen when lead character artist Michael Nolan incorporated images of diseases and fungal growth onto a human. He expressed a difficulty in changing the art from 2D to 3D, which would allow viewing from different angles. The process involved sending completed concept art to the lighting and visual effects artists, who recreated the art within the game's engine. Due to the lack of artificial light sources in the game's world, the team was forced to work with natural light. To achieve high-quality lighting, they used light maps. The use of light maps led to various problems such as the discontinuities in the lighting. This was fixed slightly, modifying the textile intensities. When characters were added to scenes, they initially looked out of place. The addition of a shadow generally fixed this. The gameplay of The Last of Us is a third-person action-adventure game putting players in the role of Joel Miller. They carry a number of firearms, such as guns, flamethrowers, and a bow. Melee weapons include machetes, axes, baseball bats, lead pipes, and also shivs. The shivs can be used to open locked doors and find a good number of ammo, medical items that can be used to level up crafting melee weapons and also level up firearms to make them stronger, and crafting the capacity to level up your weapons. Shivs can also be used for stealth kill, or immediately take out a clicker before they are bitten, since hand-to-hand combat is not the wisest course of action to take on these creatures when out of ammo. The bow and arrows can be used for stealth in direct combat, but the arrows can sometimes break either against a wall or a target, and players can also hide against a wall behind other items as well. Players can craft medical supplies for healing, and even craft Molotov cocktails, nail bombs, smoke bombs, and also the melee weapons that can be crafted with blades or sharpened enough in order to kill human enemies and infected with one swift strike. The health meter can also be upgraded, as well as other attributes such as hearing enemy and infective sounds such as stepping and clicker sounds. In terms of distractions, glass bottles and bricks can be used to distract enemies and infected or attack them. Glass bottles and bricks can also be used to stun clickers and other infected for a short amount of time when being pursued. Players must guide Joel and Ellie through dangerous territory, fighting a number of Fedra soldiers, murderous scavengers, and infected as well. As Joel, players can swim and find a wooden pallet for Ellie to ride on, as she cannot swim, and get her to solid ground. When getting to unreachable areas, Joel can give a boost to Ellie so she can drop a ladder for him, or offer her hand to get him up. At one part of the game, players get to play as Ellie, where she can only carry a bow and an arrow, and a pistol, and a rifle. She's also a fully playable character in the DLC of the game, Left Behind. An online multiplayer mode was also included, titled Factions. This multiplayer allows up to 8 players to engage in competitive gameplay and rearrange versions of the multiplayer single-player settings. The game features 3 multiplayer types: Supply Raid and Survivors are both team deathmatches, with the latter excluding the ability to respawn. Interrogation features teams investigating the location of the enemy's team lockbox, and the first to capture said lockbox wins. In every mode, players select a faction, Hunters, or Fireflies, and keep their clan alive by collecting supplies during matches. Each match is equal to 1 day. By surviving 12 weeks, players have completed a journey and can reselect their faction. The online multiplayer game service for the PlayStation 3 was shut down on September 3, 2019. The Last of Us received universal acclaim, as well as a PS4 version titled The Last of Us Remastered. Critics praised the graphics, visuals, story, character growth, and development, as well as the depiction of female and LGBT characters. The game had the greatest success of selling over 18 million copies worldwide, and is considered the most significant game of the 7th generation of video games. The game won year-end accolades, including multiple Game of the Year awards from several gaming publications, critics, and Game Awards ceremonies. It has been ranked as one of the greatest video games ever made. The Last of Us had a DLC titled Left Behind on Valentine's Day 2014. The story of the game features Ellie searching for medical supplies to heal a wounded Joel while stuck in the ruins of a shopping mall. During her trek, she has flashbacks of her journey to the mall with her love interest, Riley. Much like the original story, Left Behind was universally acclaimed for the same things of the original game, especially with its depiction of LGBT characters, which in that time, they started to grow in representation. The Last of Us had a prequel comic titled American Dreams, which told the story of Ellie and Riley before their fateful trip to the mall and before she met Joel and Tess. In this story, Ellie was training to be a Fedra soldier, while her friend Riley would end up joining the Fireflies. There were plans for a movie adaptation of the game, but it was ultimately scrapped. However, the plans for a TV series adaptation were given the green light. The TV series premiered as an HBO original series on January 15, 2023. The show stars Pedro Pascal as Joel and Bella Ramsey as Ellie. Pedro Pascal is famous for shows such as Game of Thrones, Narcos Mexico, and The Mandalorian. Bella Ramsey received critical acclaim for her role as Lyanna Mormont in Game of Thrones. Troy Baker, the original voice and mocap of Joel, will play in the show as James, one of David's henchmen. Jeffrey Pierce, the voice and mocap of Tommy, played as Perry. The right-hand man of a ruthless faction leader named Kathleen, played by Melanie Linsky. And Ashley Johnson, the voice and likeness of Ellie, played as Ellie's mother, Anna. Reprising her role from the game is Merle Dandridge, who played as Firefly soldier Marlene. The TV series received praise for being faithful to the source material while adding a few differences, such as Bill and Frank's story in the third episode of the show, Long, Long Time. This episode deviated from the source material, yet it was praised for its very well-written story and character development. Many would say that the story is about finding something so beautiful, meaningful, and precious in such a dark world without hope. The Last of Us Part 2 is the sequel to the successful 2013 game. It was released on June 19, 2020 on a PlayStation 4. Upon its release, the game received universal acclaim, winning multiple Game of the Year awards and praised by critics and journalists. Following some delays partly due to the COVID-19 pandemic, The Last of Us Part 2 was released on June 19, 2020. It received critical acclaim for its gameplay, audio design, score, performances, characters, and visual fidelity, though its narrative and themes divided critics. It was the subject of review bombing on Metacritic, with some players criticizing the story and characters. Discourse surrounding the game became adversarial. Part 2 is one of the best-selling PlayStation 4 games and the fastest-selling PlayStation 4 exclusive, with over 4 million units sold in its release weekend and over 10 million by 2022. It won more than 320 Game of the Year awards and received multiple other accolades from awards and shows and gaming publications. The story of the game takes place 4 years after the events at St. Mary's Hospital in the conclusion of the first game. Joel and Ellie are living peaceful lives in the settlement of Jackson, Wyoming. One day, tragedy strikes during patrol, and the journey for the pursuit of justice begins. The first part of the story is about Ellie seeking revenge against those who killed the person she saw as a father figure, and as her story goes on, players learn the severe and tragic consequences when one is consumed by a desire for revenge. Another part of the story is about Abby Anderson, a member of the military faction known as the Washington Liberation Front. Her story is about pursuing justice as well at first, and then while battling a murderous cult known as the Seraphites, she becomes that very person she killed when bonding with two apostates, Yara and her brother Lev. In the end, her loyalties will be put to the test. The gameplay is a third-person action-adventure game that has returning features. New gameplay features are included such as crafting explosive arrows, bullet crafting, jumping, and new stealth elements such as the ability to go prone and hiding in the grass. Like in the first game, weapons, health, and sound listening can also be upgraded as well. Players also can throw bottles and bricks while running to stun enemies such as humans and even infected as well. Human enemies such as the WLF and the Seraphites have also become more dangerous as they have powerful weapons and smoke bombs. The WLF and another enemy known as the Rattlers have dogs that can track the scent of the player and alert their owners as well as attack the player. After the success of The Last of Us, there were early concept arts being created for the sequel. Naughty Dog began development soon after the release of The Last of Us Remastered in 2014 and also after the success of Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. Neil Druckmann led as creative director and writer, reprising his role from the first game and also Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. Anthony Newman and Kurt Marginal were selected to become game directors for Part 2, overseeing gameplay elements such as level design and mechanics. Druckmann wrote the story with Haley Gross, and the team experimented with different plot structures and considered scrapping the game until they settled for an idea that mirrored the first game. Druckmann said that The Last of Us is about one of the extreme measures that one would take for love, while part two was more about how far one would go to bring justice for those they love. The themes of revenge and retribution were inspired by Druckmann's experiences growing up in Israel, where violence was commonplace. He recalled watching footage from the 2000 Ramallah lynching and how, after hearing the cheers of the crowd, his mind turned to violent thoughts and a desire to bring the perpetrators to justice. He wanted the players to feel the need for a thirst for revenge, making them realize the reality of their actions. The themes of this game were tribalism, trauma, and the pursuit of justice. Artists traveled to Seattle to analyze the architecture, vegetation, materials, topography, lighting, and capture photorealistic textures. This game was planned at first as an open-world game with hub worlds, but later transferred to a more linear style as it better suited the narrative of the game. The Last of Us Part 2 was the unfortunate target of review bombing. Many would accuse the game's developer Naughty Dog of catering to the social justice warriors, or SJWs. Some, including those who likely reviewed the game before they could have feasibly finished it, accused it of including LGBTQ propaganda. Another user on Metacritic took issue with one character being above trans girl. This character is not that, and is simply a straight woman who works out. But it's easy to imagine this take came from someone who saw the character in a pre-release cutscene and hasn't yet met the character in the game. The game was banned in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates due to its depictions of homosexuality and transgenderism, because these countries have a religious law against both. The penalty in both of these countries for homosexuality and transgenderism is death, which is something that needs to change urgently. The Last of Us continues to be seen as one of the greatest games ever made. After 10 long years, many still play it to this day, and a sequel as well. The game would also be re-released as The Last of Us Part 1 on PS5 and PC, but many prefer to play the original PS3 or the PS4 remastered games. The Last of Us is a fantastic game about survival, love, and the search for and finding something precious in a dark world without hope. While Part 2 is about the consequence of the desire for revenge and the pursuit of justice as well. This concludes the history of The Last of Us. Until next episode, this is John of Video Games and the World signing off. Peace.